Okay, here we go. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to turn it over to Alfred to start us off.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining today's session and even for agreeing with us, through this learning journey of creating greater sense self-awareness in us when it comes to issues around identity and how, power dynamics does intersect different identity groups that we find ourselves in. And importantly, how we even reflect this in the kind of work that we do in the development space. So just by taking this first step on joining us on this journey, for me, is a good decision and one that ultimately will benefit most of the clients that we work with, especially at the last mile rural community level. Next slide. So what does our agenda look like for today? I'll quickly introduce myself and my background and expertise, especially around power dynamics. And then we'll review the workshop roadmap together and then do a very quick activity around, building in us a greater sense of self-awareness when it comes to the way we choose to identify differently from others, right? Based on our own lived experiences and based on our own criteria. And then we will link that to power dynamics in terms of how that typically, naturally comes to different identity groups that we find ourselves in. We will end the session by looking at the next steps from this initial convening. So my name is Alfred Yeboah. I've been doing this with my colleague, Amelia, but I'm a social development practitioner and also a behavior change specialist and an advocacy strategist with over 19 years of experience developing and managing social and behavior change programming. I'm the Director of Operations for Grameen Foundation and based in our Accra, Ghana office. I've had extensive experience using human-centered design approach for strategic information management and advocacy. I am certified in practical skills for leading gender change in organizations by the Digital Frontier Institute, DFI. In September 2022, having met all the requirements, the DFI also conferred on me as a certified gender equality change maker. Amelia, would you want to introduce yourself at this point?
Thank you, Alfred. Pleasure to be with everybody, and thank you for joining us as well on this session. My name is Amelia Kuklovitz. I'm our Vice President of Programs at Grameen Foundation, overseeing our programming globally and supporting on a number of projects. My background also comes from a women's economic empowerment background, having managed a number of these projects and implemented gender mainstreaming on both a project level as well as an organizational level. And I'm also one of our trained facilitators of the Exploring Power Dynamics workshop. So pleasure to share experience with all of you today, and really looking forward to your active participation. That's kind of the richness of this workshop, is being able to interact with others, hear other stories, and gain others' perspectives. That's what's always been really enriching for me. So thank you everybody for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Amelia. It's always a pleasure co-facilitating, this training with Amelia and other lead facilitators within Grameen. So the big question I know you may be thinking is, who are we as an organization, Grameen Foundation? So I would say that, next slide, please. So I would say that in as much as women in low income, no, so we can go back to the other slide, sorry. So in as much as women in low-income countries around the world, we know exhibit extraordinary power, we also acknowledge that entrenched gender biases in both economic and social systems, which manifest in harmful traditions, beliefs, and attitudes that touch every part of their lives, prevent these women from fully utilizing their power to either earn an income, gain agency, or even to be more resilient. Grameen Foundation is a global nonprofit whose mission is to enable the poor, especially women, to create a world without poverty and hunger. We focus on those most vulnerable to poverty and exploitation, notably low-income, rural, and displaced women. In fact, women are at the center of all we do. Grameen Foundation invests in the power of women by first identifying where economic and social systems are failing her. We then partner with local partners using innovation and digital technologies to transform these systems from the inside out to give her the equitable access she needs to come out of poverty in a meaningful way. Gender equity is not just a lens through which we view our work, it is actually foundational to our purpose. We lead with gender and invest in the power of women and consider the needs of these women in a holistic manner. How do we do this? We first de-risk the women at the personal, household, or community levels, where entrenched gender and social norms prevent them from using their power to break free from poverty. We implement with our partners various household and community gender dialogues that facilitates joint household decision-making. We also cultivate a number of male champions who we recognize as key co-investors in the enterprises of their women. Secondly, we also de-risk these women with our local partners and strengthen them to more fully support her. From start to finish, we leverage our suite of gender power tools for women economic strengthening, financial inclusion for female clients, whilst importantly mitigating unintended negative consequences through engagement of men. The Gender Power Tools is Grameen's progressive training package to help local actors invest in women's power. The first of our gender power tools is the Exploring Power Dynamics workshop that leads partner staff through internal and personal reflection about how harmful gender and social norms play out along intersectional differences at work and at home. This unique workshop catalyzes the motivation of organizations and firms to act towards dismantling gender barriers, and importantly, build our partners' capacity in gender and safeguarding and also do no harm strategy. Partners are able to convert their enhanced awareness into action through gender and social inclusion analysis, followed by gender equity action plan, and then integrate positive male engagement activities, including community gender dialogues, and also training of male spouses. It is this holistic approach that leads to transforming systems for the women that we work with, so that they can increase their incomes and entrepreneurship, agency, and financial and climate resilience. With close to 30 years of experience in almost 50 countries, Grameen is proud to share our expertise through the Exploring Power Dynamics workshop. So what is this Exploring Power Dynamics workshop all about, and why is it unique? Next slide, please. The workshop is structured carefully within a three-part inclusiveness framework that guides a number of power-packed activities, leading to enhanced awareness by unpacking the multiple dimensions of our identity groups. And then we delve into the intricate workings of power systems that come with different identity groups through an intersectional lens, and importantly, raise awareness of the ways power impacts all of us. In parts 2 and 3, we explore practical skills and steps to deal with unconscious identity bias and harmful gender norms, and be equipped with effective communication and dialogue strategies to navigate multiple identities and challenge power dynamics. Participants leave the workshop with an action plan to assess their progress at working at the deeper levels around systems and non-change. What approach does the training take? It is very participatory, non-academic, experiential, and it's full of practical sessions. It offers personal self-reflection about how power and difference affect our lives, our roles at work, and then basically interactions within systems. It also fosters safe space to express ourselves in supportive, non-judgmental ways, conducive for mutual learning and self-discovery for transformational change. And it is very dialogue-based to support positive communication. And throughout the workshop, we make room for people to freely express their views in a respectful manner. We also promote, the norm around, practicing empathy, trying to seek to put ourselves in others' experiences. There's high level of confidentiality because people are able to share their own life experiences, and there are no judgments with this unique workshop. Next slide, please. We will briefly look at an activity around creating in us a greater sense of awareness about the multiple dimensions of our identity. Though there are hundreds of identity markers, we can look at including, as you know, race, gender, religion, height, sexual orientation, education, language, nationality, class, ability. In the interest of time today, we would only consider one of these identity markers, which is age. The aim is to increase awareness of who we are and how we identify ourselves and others, and the meaning we give to those identities. It could be sometimes uncomfortable when we are called on to identify one way or the other, or based on our own experiences, which may not be palatable. However, our greatest learning most of the time comes from being uncomfortable. We are now going to look at age as an identity marker using our own criteria. And I'll stress this point, using our own criteria for how and why we identify as belonging to one age category or the other. In fact, for some, it is purely based on their date of birth. Others may be based on their lived experiences and how they choose to identify. And importantly, the meanings that they give to such age category. So as you can see in this slide, the question is, which group do you identify with? It has to do with you and not somebody influencing or telling you, you belong here because I know your date of birth, for instance. There could be so much more to why people make their decisions, why they want to differently identify with one group or the other. So for today's very simple exercise, we are going to self-identify, whether we see ourselves as belonging to an age category referred to as Generation Z. That is typically in the books, right? In the books, people will say these are people born between the ages of 1997 or later. Or we may choose to identify as millennials, those born according to the books between the ages of 1981 and 1996, or Generations X, those born according to the book between 1965 and 1980, or the boomers, those who were born 1964 or earlier. Now, I like this point about perceived traits, and our stress is perceived, because this is how some others have chosen to categorize people based on age. That typically it does appear, and I'm marking my words carefully, it does appear that those who identify as Generation Z are more global in nature, they are entrepreneurial, they are progressive, they are less focused, and the millennials are a bit competitive, open-minded, achievement-oriented. Again, based on either research or what people know, they feel the Generation X are quite flexible, they are informed, they are a bit skeptical, quite independent. And for the boomers, they are just optimistic, competitive, workaholic, and team-oriented. This is based on some other people's perceived traits according to age category. Next slide. But the question I'm asking you is to use your own criteria and kindly unmute and let us know which group you identify with. And you could tell us the criteria or the rationale behind why you chose a particular age category. So the floor is open. So we are dealing with question 1 now. So let's just limit ourselves to question 1 now. I want you to tell me how you identify and just give a brief rationale or reasoning behind why you identify as such. Thank you.
Alfred, thank you for the intro. I can start, I can share. Well, when I look at it's Brigitta from Nairobi. If you look at just the years as they've been laid out, I would identify as a millennial. But when it comes to the perceived traits, I don't recall all of them that were on the previous slide, but I feel like I have one from each of the groups. So I guess that's why, yeah, that's why you know, within generation Gen Z, maybe I'm progressive. Within the millennials, I'm open-minded. Within Gen X, I'm flexible. I'm independent. Within the boomers, so I guess it's a good thing that, you know, they're just perceived traits and not necessarily what I should you know, take on just because I'm a millennial.
Great. That's a very useful contribution, Vegeta, and thank you. So clearly, from what Vegeta is saying, there is some amount of misalignment based on these perceived traits to where one may want to comfortably identify based on probably their date of birth. There's a clear misalignment based on her own analysis, and therefore may want to identify differently, though she may be born within a particular age category. Great. Any other response?
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Aaron. Good to hear your voice.
Hi, I'm Aaron from the Philippines. I guess I identify as a millennial because of my age, but aside from like what Bridgetta shared is the traits. I think like I do am I connect to the some of the traits the millennials presented here, but it changes over time. Like I think I'm a less competitive, you know, as the years grow older, you know, more settled in what I'm doing. But definitely when I was younger, it's I would have it some traits are more forward than others. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. So from what I am hearing, or if I understand you correctly, though you may identify as a millennial, some of the traits there probably do not fit. And other traits, specific traits for other age categories may apply to you. So probably it is just not a perfect description for an age category we give. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Let me go with myself. Again, I'm a millennial. I'm on the border mark. I'm 1981. Border mark, let me see what the perceived traits are here. Open-minded, yes, it's good to be open-minded. Achievement-oriented, it's turning out to be true for me. Competitive, somewhat. But then also share a lot in some of the traits attributable to Generation X. I'm a bit flexible and progressive in my thinking. So again, I'll pick from Generation Z. And one from the boomers, team-oriented. So in terms of probably how so sometimes you realize that sometimes we are even confused. We are in a state of confusion when we are pushed to choose an identity group. Sometimes we are confused because our lived experiences now come to play and they don't seem to fit probably boxes that have been created and people or society would want us to fit in. Yeah, basically that's the analogy. Sometimes it's so difficult when you are dealing with social issues and you want to force people to fit into boxes or containers, what I call psychological containers that have already been set, and you force people to fit in there. Good, so we can go to question 2, and thanks again for sharing. Question 2, so how do you feel being part of this group? So, I mean, in your mind, you have identified with a group. How do you feel being a part of this group and not the others?
I'll jump in, Alfred, kind of on, I was kind of reflecting, I'm with you on the 1981, so we're kind of those cuspers where we lived that whole session of time. Kind of seeing ourselves as this generation that lived without a lot of technology, like we're the last generation that lived with a lot of technology and then onboarded a lot of technology. That feels like one of the pieces that really marks the millennial experience. But I was reflecting similar too, where I saw competitive is also within the boomers, but the boomers were maybe more team oriented and we were, in quotes, more achievement oriented. So interesting how that reflection also sparked something in my mind as well. So and just like from a societal perspective, there's a lot of talk about what millennials are and what they aren't, and kind of our role in society right now, both positive and negative. So it's just, I know that generation is in a lot of people's mouths. So.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with you. Again, this brings us to this concept around stereotyping, right? Once you start putting people in boxes, you can be a bit stereotypical and just tag them that this group of people belonging to this box are like this, I like that, which we have to refrain from, because people who may even be a part of that group may think or act or behave differently. So that is why sometimes it's a bit problematic when we try to generalize and stereotype people based on an identity group. I mean, Amelia, can you fill us in on question 3?
If I'm not part of this group, so on another group, you mean?
Yeah, so if you are not part of this group, so let's say if you are not part of the 3 other groups, what are your perspectives you have about them?
Mm-hmm.
So it's about us and them.
So I more kind of from a work perspective, I worked a lot more with Gen Z. And that piece about that informality and the like you hear a lot of that, but then working with a lot of Gen Z people, I don't find that to be true. So that's also kind of a perspective thing of the informality or, the flexibility and things like that. More than anything, my lived experience has been kind of also a very driven and creative generation, and flexible more in the positive terms. And so I know that's one that, there's a lot of the workforce right now that is the Millennium Gen Z combination and trying to work together. So I know there's a lot of memes and jokes on there, but that hasn't been my lived experience.
Absolutely true. I mean, please, the floor is open. Feel free to unmute. Let us know. Now we are looking at us and them. So if you identify as a Generation Z, that's fine. But now we want your perspective, the perspectives you have about the groups you don't identify with.
Alfred, I'll jump in because I need to represent Generation X. Maybe I'm the only one. And but I
I'm
was
also in
surprised.
your group, Lisa.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, please
you
carry
have
on.
a companion, Lisa.
Yes, because it was interesting to hear Amelia talk about growing up with technology. And when I grew up, we just played outside all day because we had one television. And, I remember when I got my first color TV, and we were like on cutting edge technology in my house and didn't have a cell phone until, yeah, like anyway. So I remember not having a lot of the things that millennials and Gen Z take for granted. That's what they grew up with. But I lived in a world where it was more relationship based, like you were with people all the time. You didn't have all this technology around you. But one thing I was going to make around the other groups is I was surprised to see that the Gen Z were less focused, because I had a sense in the workplace that a lot of workplace strategies are focused on sort of that group of workers, because they know what they want. They're a bit more demanding on employers. Like they even say that they're more interested in portfolio working. So they want to go into a company. They don't want to stay 20 years. They want to get as much as they need and want, the issue around being global, I get that. So it's interesting, the less focus, because I thought they were more focused on what they wanted out of life and made demands on others around them to get those things.
So we are challenging the what I call psychological containers, the boxes. That is basically the whole idea behind this exercise. That, look, people have different ways. Some are just not visible to us, right? Because it has to do with people's own self-introspection and rationale, why they want to identify as such, which is not visible to us. So this is where, as professionals, we are taught through this workshop on how to deploy effective dialoguing skills to dig deeper into people to much more fully understand them. That is the difficult aspects of getting to know or attend to the fuller picture, or to the, to a whole issue, or to a whole person, as we deal with in the kind of work that we do. Are there any other contributions? I mean, can answer question 2, question 3. I mean, please share and contribute to our knowledge sharing today.
Yeah, hi, this is Udita from India. And I fall into Gen X, as Lisa, fall into that group. But when I look into the traits as well as the perceived traits,
Can you go back to
in
the,
fact, yes. So, in fact, I could relate what Lisa was saying, what we have like grown up through with a landline phone, with even getting an STD, giving calls from an STD booth, which our children or Gen X people would be totally unaware about. They don't know what does a STD booth look like. So again, viewing black and white televisions and getting transformed into a color television, and then a computer.
yeah.
And laptop was like out of this scene anywhere. And I still remember when I did my thesis, when I was doing my PhD, I had to write everything in the notebook and get it typed with somebody else at the cyber cafe and take it back in a floppy. I don't know people here in this group of uh, Gen X and millennials, they know what is floppy all about. So we used to take it in a floppy, and that floppy we used to keep it. Again, go back to the same cyber cafe and give him back, because he would have confused with the lot of, there was no demarcation. Later on, those stickers came up, And that too, one of my cousins who traveled from UK had got those stickers. That's how in India we never had that access to those stickers during that point of time. I'm talking about late 90s. So that is how. And if you see today, and it is AI all around. So we have seen the transition from a desktop computer to a laptop to whatnot, and cell phones and everything. But still, I would say we have imbibed the characters of boomers also: workaholic, team oriented, those traits Gen X people still believes in. So in fact, and there are a lot of things to learn from millennials, which is open-mindedness, achievement oriented. We don't follow into that. When I look to my son who is 27 years old, I was like thinking he falls into Gen X and then less focused. I would disagree with this. Because I find him and his generation to be very much focused, and which we are not. So that way, Alfred, if you put into different buckets, in each of the bucket you have a conduit, so that there is a Venn diagram all over.
Good.
There is a
Yeah.
Venn diagram all over with intersections all around the place. But it's a wonderful exercise, I tell you. Thank you so much for taking us through this. Love doing it.
Thank you. Thank you. And I
Thank you
mean,
so much.
thank you so much also for sharing your lived experience, which Lisa says she can identify with, right? It
Yeah.
is some of these lived experiences that are shared as part of this training that is very holistic and unique, that brings the concepts to life. And we love it so much when people share their lived experiences, because then people can relate to it. And the fact that these perceived traits can actually be rearranged in different ways and people will still not agree. That is the
True.
point, because it has to do with people's own self-awareness and self-introspection and how they choose to identify based on their lived experiences. So that is the point.
And lastly, I'm sorry,
No,
I'll
go
just
ahead.
add one. Yeah, I'll just add one point. With the chat GPT in our lives now, it has taken away our confidence. And it's across all the 4 categories, I also. If you're writing a mail, why you have to again check it in the chat GPT? Come on, it's enough. Forget about writing reports and articles. It, so chat GPT, again, I don't know. Yeah, I may be sounding like Gen X person, but yes, the youngest one must be thinking what this person is saying, what Udita is saying. But this is it. It is personal opinion. Thank you.
No, it's fine. I respect that. And thank you so much for sharing. So are there any other contributions? Please feel free to share. Otherwise, yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Alfred. Pooja Gupta this side from India. Actually, I fall in millennials, and according to me, everybody struggles with 3 generations. One with is on generation. The second with the previous one, they learn according to their parents' experience, and after marriage, if they have kids, then again they learn with the new generation. Like if I am talking about me, if I am talking about me, then when I was small, I was learning through my generation only, and I was gaining experience and learning through my parents' experience because they share their experience. Like at your age, we were using this kind of gadgets, we were playing this kinds of games, and it was almost excited. We every time tried like how they how they were behaving in their old age. Like in their infant age. So we were talking about like that only. Now, after marriage, I have son who is studying in class grade 12. So we are still learning from his experience. So I am trying to learn new slang, new generation words, so that I think everybody falls in three generations. One in which he or she belongs, the second with parents, and third with the new generation. So we all are learning, and everybody is having different traits. And as Udita told, we all are having different traits. Like sometimes it depends upon the situation. Sometimes we are open-minded, sometimes we are or achievement oriented. Sometimes we are competitive, sometimes we are workaholic. So sometimes it depends. It should be less focused, or sometimes it depends. It should be given more focus. So according to situations, we just behave. I think so.
Absolutely agree. I think another participant agrees with you. Some of these things are very contextual. It is based on our life experiences that continue to evolve over time. Things we come in contact with could, a lot of things could play out in terms of informing how we choose to identify. So I would say that this exercise, this very simple exercise that we went through about self-identifying based on age and the different meanings we choose to give to why, we identify one way or the other. What it does is that we could have done this with other identity markers. And in the, this unique workshop, we are able to play around with other identity markers that sometimes, like sexual orientation, for instance, like gender, like religion, like race, which probably in terms of the decision-making processes for people to identify sometimes becomes a bit challenging and uncomfortable. But as I indicated already, sometimes it could be uncomfortable choosing to identify with one group or the other because of some perception that people hold of some identity groups. So sometimes we may even want to stay away from some groups. That process of self-introspection and sober reflection in making a decision based on whatever we choose to identify with one group or the other is what gets us into building a greater sense of self-awareness, something which we may take for granted or has just not crossed our minds. It is this process that teaches us to surface what is hidden and also appreciate the multiplicity of our identities. We can choose to ignore these identities, yet in reality, each one brings with it a very unique experience that influences who we actually are. So the iceberg illustration, as you see on this slide, I would say it's a good illustration for how some elements of our identity are visible and some are invisible. The rationale or reasoning for how and why people choose to identify in one way or the other may just not be visible to us. So sometimes we need to surface what is hidden and appreciate the multiplicity of our identities. In this process, we share our assumptions, and by sharing our assumptions, we draw the other person out or to get them to further share their opinions on issues or even how they identify and why they do what they do. The aim is to have our listeners or the other person or the them, that is not us, to surface their assumptions about why you express a certain preference or feeling about something. You as a speaker often come forward with your own assumptions, which helps to deepen the dialogue. The iceberg helps us visualize how some elements of our identity are visible such as behavior and appearance, and some are invisible, such as assumptions. Often, we allow only the surface traits to give meaning to an entire person, which in fact could be misleading and not accurate at all. So as development practitioners and professionals, we need to start talking about diversity. And by doing that, we begin to lift up what is not visible to the eye. We learn how to appreciate and go below the surface to bring up resources and experience. Next slide, please. Each identity group membership has what we call a power dynamic, a type of interplay of power between or amongst different identity groups. So, for example, the age identity group that we just looked at. There could be some power play. As Amelia mentioned, she may identify as a generation, a millennial generation, a millennial, but works mostly with people who may identify as Generation X and not the same categories as she will identify, right? We are saying that these power dynamics are in fact real and they show up in the workplace. Through this Exploring Power Dynamics workshop, we are able to explore how these dynamics can impact us personally, but importantly also at our workplace in terms of effectiveness. For example, I could pose a question to you. Who amongst us is left-handed? Do you have anyone who is left-handed or anyone who knows somebody who is left-handed? And the question I'll pose to you is, what was it like growing up left-handed? Do you have anybody who is left-handed or know somebody who is left-handed?
Hi, Alfred. Oh, it looks like Ellie's gonna go, so I'll let her speak.
No, that's okay. I'm not left-handed. Are you left-handed?
No, my mom is, so I was
Okay.
just gonna talk
I'll
about
let
her.
you go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I'm not left-handed, but my mom is, and I remember her telling me stories about being taught how to write and being hit with a ruler on her left hand when she would try to use that hand, and even little things like scissors being, not made for her to use. So just being on the periphery of her experience kind of informed a little bit about how the world is made for right-handed people like myself.
Absolutely. Ellie, do you want to share? Are you left-handed or you know someone?
I'm not. My friend, I remember growing up and sometimes they struggled a bit with scissors or when we were writing in our notebooks, like it wasn't as easy for them. And then even like writing on a chalkboard or a whiteboard, they would be writing and try not to erase what they're writing. And yeah, just seeing those little things, that yeah, it wasn't exactly geared towards them. And then eventually as we got older, they started to come out with new products that were made especially for like scissors for left-handed people or notebooks and things like that. So it was great that I could see the difference of them feeling included versus before when they were kind of struggling.
Absolutely. And thanks for sharing. So
Alfred,
clearly
I'll
from
also join in.
Yeah.
We have a former colleague who came from the health sector who is left-handed. And
Okay.
I remember to this day her experience because she studied surgery and eye surgery, which is extremely precise. And so she opened my eyes to a whole new world of medical instruments as well as teaching techniques that didn't apply to her at all. And she had to, for her profession, learn how to do things in the other direction and translate basically everything.
Wow, that's eye-opening. With that eye doctor example, Amelia, wow, I didn't think of that. So clearly with these examples, then, for those who are left-handed, they needed to make some adjustments in order to fit in. That is what we are gleaning from these stories. Sometimes even when you are kids in school, teachers would insist that you write with using your right hand. This is very common in where I grew up. And again, for the tools and items that are basically manufactured or developed, as we heard from these examples, left-handed people would have to adapt to using them because they are not made for left-handed people. And I know scissors was mentioned, even the bottle openers, some musical instruments, pulse equipment, and as Amelia mentioned, even someone being trained to use equipment for eye surgery needed to adapt by operating from the other end. So with these illustrations, clearly we can say that the world is made for right-handed people, believe it or not. But these are the assumptions informing how people proceed to develop equipment, tools, and basically structure the world. So the big question is, who is the world made up for? With this left-handed as right-handed example, you realize that we can at least come to some conclusion that the world is made for right-handed people. So in effect, these are the people in the dominant group. And if they are in the dominant group, then suffice to say that the left-handed people are in a subordinate group. And I mean, from this workshop, we say that those who find themselves at any point in time in a dominant group are those in a power up group membership. And those in the subordinate group are in the power down group membership. Why? Because in most cases, they have to adapt to fit in. And it is those in the power up or dominant group that basically sets and make the rules for those in the power down group to follow. So I'll say that these different life experiences and mindsets can and in fact does impact on our relationships. So sometimes we even wake up and I'm not sure we wake up and we say to ourselves we are happy because we are able to see, because we take for granted our ability to see, forgetting that some people wake up every morning painfully knowing that they are unable to see and would have to put in some measures to be able to fit in. So oftentimes, if we have power up group membership, we are unaware and unconscious of our unearned privileges, while those in the power down group membership are very aware and conscious of most of the time their lack of privilege. Yeah, so basically this slide is just telling us some of the characteristics or features that comes with those in a power up group or power down group. The father power group basically sets the rules. They determine what reality is. Those in the subordinate or power down have to fit in. The power group will set the rules. The subordinate groups would have to follow those rules. And it's normal for a power up group, for example, a group of sighted individuals, even if we have a grouping like this. Why? Because it may sound even abnormal to say we have a group of sighted individuals, because it's seen as normal for most of us to be sighted, whilst forgetting that there are a lot of groups of people who are blind, right? Associations, and that we all accept because they are in the minority. They need to come together to fight for their cause. Next slide, please. So we are happy to share more resources about this workshop that will lead to our teams that we work with gaining experiential learning and also having a gradual mindset shifts and also team building that fosters a safe space for personal reflections and also self-discovery for transformational change. The workshop also leads to greater awareness and a commitment to address harmful norms, deal with unconscious biases at the workplace, and also offers practical skills for our teams to dialogue with empathy and on how our teams can also hold difficult conversations through active listening, surfacing their own assumptions, suspending their judgments, and importantly, offers conflict resolution skills. So what we've just seen from this introductory session, which I call a tip of the iceberg, is that there's so much more to the workshop, but what it does for especially organizations that enroll in the workshop is that it provides a very clear roadmap through action planning so that these participating organizations are able to move their human resources towards gender equity transformation, a transformation that levels power, one that uses co-creation, one that is question-driven, and more importantly, community-anchored. This kind of training offers firms and organizations the opportunity to build the sense around cognitive, affective, and the psychomotor skills that are needed to really bring about the real change that these organizations need at all levels. Again, the workshop embraces practical steps to address gender-based violence in the operation of organizations. Organizations are able to relook at their safeguarding policies with a new lens. They are able to explore successful ways to design and implement women economic strengthening programming, paying particular attention to the principles of do no harm, male engagement, so that they are able to address the negative unintended consequences as a result of economic strengthening program, especially with women. It also provides another way for organizations to analyze through an intersectional lens links between gender inequity and equality, power, and gender-based violence. Organizations are better able to conceptualize the training as part of a longer-term whole organizational program, and also leads to a more self-reflective, critical, less judgmental, constructive dialogue, and a robust safeguarding action plan for participating organizations. We at Grameen are really looking forward for an opportunity to work with the many organizations and firms in the development phase, in the NGO sector, and in other, firms or development spaces, so that together we are able to build this common journey and pathway towards what we call true gender transformational change. So thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for sharing. And again, as I said, this is just a tip of the iceberg. Over to you, Rebecca. Thank you.
Thanks, Alfred. Thanks, Amelia. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. This introductory workshop is going to be free to the public. We will be offering it once a month. So spread the word. We'll share more details about how people can join and learn more. But thank you so much again for getting a taste of, like Alfred said, just the tip of the iceberg of the power dynamics work that Grameen does. So thanks, everybody. Hope you have a great rest of the week.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, and bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Bye.
See you again.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.